healthcare system is broken, but it doesn't have to be. This is Revenue Cycle Optimized by Infinix Healthcare. We discuss the latest challenges in the revenue cycle space and provide actionable tips on how to overcome them at your organization.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. Today's session is titled Making Patient Financial Responsibility More Manageable. And joining me as my guest is Evan Martin. He's the VP of Revenue Cycle at ZoomCare. Evan, just want to thank you for being here. How are you doing today?
Doing great. Thanks for having me again, Stuart.
Awesome.
Excited for today's topic.
Yeah, I know. And it's always great to have you on as well, because, you're going to speak a plethora of stuff, because you really bring a practical perspective, to the conversation, because this topic is not just about patient balances, which is what we're going to talk about, or payment plans, which is what we're going to talk about, but it's also about how organizations think through patient financial journey, think about that journey the patient has to take and the options that they can realistically offer, how that differs depending on the kind of organization that you're in. So you're going to kind of go into that as well. So what we're going to talk about today, everyone, is how providers, especially for nonprofit organizations, can create a more manageable and more patient-friendly financial experience by starting earlier, setting expectations very clearly in the beginning and giving patients practical options before the financial conversation turns into collections issues. Sounds like right up your alley, Evan.
Yeah, hopefully. We'll see how we go.
We'll see how we go, right? Now, as always, just a reminder to everyone that we will have some Q&A at the end. So we'll get to as many of those as we possibly can. Just drop them in the Q&A box. And also, I welcome comments. You always know that if you have something to say, something insightful, drop it in there and we'll try and read comments as well. So with that, Evan, you ready to dive in?
Yeah, let's do it.
Awesome. So you made a really important distinction in our earlier conversation when we were prepping for this episode between what nonprofits can often offer patients and what for-profit organizations are typically set up to offer. Can you unpack that difference and explain why it matters so much in the patient financial journey?
Yeah, I think, I work currently for a for-profit entity. I spent most of my career working for nonprofits. So when I think of a nonprofit world, they have, payment plans without interest rates. They have huge financial assistance programs. Many of them also have Medicaid screening programs, both for medical practice groups and for health systems. And I think it's just, they have this wide variety of also being able to leverage local community grants and funding and things of that nature to really help support their patients. And a lot of them also have nonprofit elements in their fundraising groups that are picking out additional fundings where somebody said, hey, I'm going to donate, $1 million of my trust to your organization to help support patient families, patient transportation to and from appointments. So there's this plethora of service agencies that are available and that they leverage. They also have to, as a nonprofit, adhere to how much community give back that they have to do and community resources. So they look at the financial journey of a patient sometimes differently than how we do as a for-profit. You see for-profits offer short-term payment plans. Some of those are offering interest rates. A lot of them don't do financial screening, especially if they don't accept Medicaid. They also don't offer other alternatives for financial assistance. A lot of them will offer vouchers for taxi cab services, things of that nature to keep their patients that might have a few community issues at bay, but you don't see them really targeting that patient population. And you also see how they have the conversation about financial assistance differently with a patient for upfront collections versus at a nonprofit would do. So it does paint this light of if I'm a patient that might be going to a medical practice group that's for profit and then they refer me to a nonprofit, I start to question as a patient, and I've done it myself as a patient, say, well, why wouldn't I convert my care over to a nonprofit for both my primary care and for my specialty services? Because I have this plethora that's available to me if I'm in that financial bracket where I need those services.
Right. Exactly. And also, to that point, you said that for many For-profit organizations, the default option is often just a standard payment plan. Sometimes it's not very flexible in how it's designed. So what problems does that create for patients, especially those with lower balances or limited financial flexibility, to put it mildly?
Yeah, I think this is going to become an even bigger issue, Stuart, as hopefully we'll dive a little bit into that one big, beautiful bill act that's coming around. Because I think this is going to really heightens the conversation, especially around self-pay and in patients that are purchasing independent funded insurances as well, and that becoming more costly for them. But what really, for this portion, what really I see as the biggest limiting factor for patients is if I have $1,000 balance, some organizations are for profit will only give you like they have a minimum payment due of $100 a month. And if
Mm.
I have $1,000, it might not meet that threshold of being able to pay that off over 10 months. It might have to be paid off in 3 months. So really, I'm taking that and doing a split. That, automatically puts a hardship on because none of us want to experience, oh, we have this host of medical bills that just came out of nowhere. I wasn't anticipating getting the flu or needing a CT. And all of a sudden now I have this large balance that
Mm.
I didn't work it into my family's expense every month.
Right.
But I could put it over a period of time at a shorter payment, but we're seeing a lot of them not have large long-term payment plans. The longest that I've seen is 24 months when we were shopping around at our competitors in the Pacific Northwest to see where did we fall, but those were for huge balances, like surgical balances, not for your traditional, hey, I went to an urgent care or I had to have an x-ray with a CT and all these additional labs done. And now my balance is, $700, $800, but that's still financial hardship for my family of three. And I don't, it might be because my partner doesn't work or my spouse doesn't work or, I'm a single income household, a single parent, that type of deal. So everybody's situation is different. And we don't take that into consideration when we establish
Mm.
payment plans. We take it into what makes sense to do the quickest recovery and not have that AR sitting on our books.
Right, exactly. And it's almost like when you diagnose people for any illnesses, there's always some comorbidities or some other, ailments that are factors. Maybe there's social determinants of health that play a factor. It's the same with your financial health. Your physical health makes a difference based on your environment, what your diet, if you're eating, if you're not eating, if you're sleeping, whatever. But definitely with your financial, there are mitigating circumstances involved in that all day long, right? So what stood out in your comments was that this is not just about collection strategy. As you said earlier, it's just about let's pay off the AR because that seems to be the main concern. But how do you think about financial responsibility as part of the overall patient journey rather than just a back end revenue cycle event? Just kind of a deeper dive into the last statement you made.
Yeah, I actually think, revenue cycle, we just had a leadership summit yesterday at work and I started off my portion of the presentation when somebody was like telling everybody like what's going on are our initiatives here at ZoomCare. And my first words were revenue cycle equals patient experience. The whole portion, the whole cycle. So from point of the patient presenting for scheduling through their if they go to bad debt collections, that is a patient's journey. It's their financial journey and it's actually part of their mental health journey as well and has big impacts. If I all of a sudden can't afford my bill, it mentally drains on me, which then affects my actual physical health and in addition to my mental health. So I really look at the approach of patient collections and patient as a patient experience and wanting to give our patients and patients throughout the nation all the tools and resources that are possible for me to do in a for-profit or in a non-for-profit instance. We should be throwing the entire kitchen sink at all of our patients constantly of saying, here are all the different avenues we can help you with to help you have a true positive patient financial experience along with your medical patient experience.
Mhm. Absolutely, absolutely. And you mentioned, that the conversation should start up front with, an estimate and to move quickly into what options the patient actually, has. Why is that sequence so important? And what changes when organizations do that before or at the time of service?
I think what really changes is how the patients drive their own medical care and knowing what they can afford at that point in time. It also gives them the ability to do the shopping. Like, we are not just looking for the best quality location, we're also looking for what meets our financial means. So, at least giving our patients the upfront component is really critical and key. I think, the pricing transparency regulation has great intentions, and it did really push hospitals and major health systems to look at putting in estimators up front for patients. Where it falls is the patients don't know what diagnosis they're going to actually get or what level of acuity that they're going to map into, but it gives them a good enough range to get an idea of where they're going to start. Where we falter still from a regulatory perspective, and not that I want to add more work to my team and myself, but
Right.
as a medical practice group, we're not adhered to those same standards. We don't have to do estimates. We don't have to have estimator tools. And I think that, our approach at ZoomCare is to be as financially transparent as possible to our patients and give them, here's what the minimum is, here's what the maximum is for a cold instance, a bladder infection, a general eye infection, ear infection, cold, no, sore throat. So we try to give them out there. We're not down to an estimator tool quite yet. We're still working through picking who's the best partner for us, given our different populations of health and different specialties that we're offering. But at the
Mhm.
same time, it's so transparent for the patient to be able to understand, and it's key too for our providers to understand that when they're telling a patient, "Hey, we could do a CT or we could start with an x-ray. The x-ray is going to cost you about X and the CT is going to cost you about Y," that the patient understands what's the benefits of both medically, but then also understands which one they want to select, or maybe they select both for the financial stake for
Yeah.
themselves. But
Yeah.
I think we're empowering the patient to make their own decision about their healthcare a little bit more.
Right. And this is kind of a secondary question to that. I'm thinking just the competitive edge that you could bring to the table for your organization. I mean, if I'm a patient and I know I'm going to a place that's going to tell me, the best that they can, what the cost is going to be up front, as transparent as possible. They're going to give me choices and inform me, hey, if we do this test or do this process, it's going to cost X. And that give me options, to pay it. And that's kind of where that patient financial journey begins.
Yep.
And to me, I'm going there instead of the other clinic that says, have a seat, we'll call you back. They do what they do, and then all of a sudden you get this big bill because maybe they weren't covered, or maybe they had a high deductible, whatever the case may be. We assume most patients already know that information. I'm the kind of person who does know all that before I go, but not everybody does that. And so they're walking in blind, and so it helps you. It's kind of like a Jerry Maguire moment. Help me help you, right?
Yep.
So absolutely.
Yeah, I think one thing that everybody should consider, and I'm not a flyer person, like I don't look at a flyer when I go into my own provider's clinic, right? It's not, but I am looking at what's rolling on their TV screens and what's doing at that. And I think we have this beautiful world of smartphones and where we can leverage QR codes to drive our patients while they're waiting for that appointment to be able to go out to and have a QR code that takes them right to the financial page to say, here's where you can get your estimate. Here's what financial assistance tools we have for you. And then also additionally, here's what you need to know about your financial journey today. So patients are looking for that. We just aren't putting it in mediums that are becoming accustomed for people to look
Right.
at. We're still going to the older models.
Right, right. Thinking forward, embracing technology, instead of, just doing a status quo. It'll save a whole lot of money on paper, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Now, when you think about giving patients options, going back to the options that you give them, what does a meaningful set of options really look like? I mean, in other words, I mean, you kind of touched on it a little bit,
Yeah.
but in other words, what separates a patient-friendly financial experience from one that technically offers help but still leaves the patient stuck?
Yeah, I think what sets them apart really is what's that plethora of options. So I'll here at ZoomCare, for instance, what we're doing is we establish payment plans with the timelines of what our financial team will allow for and what that means is. And then we also looked at partnering with other business partners out there who offer longer term payment plans at a reduced rate, potentially based off how fast the patient could pay off their invoice. And that one's really, I'm really proud of that partnership that we have picked. We're the first organization in the state of Oregon to partner with this group from the East Coast, where our patients, if they could pay out, if I owe $100, let's say, for my portion of the responsibility, if I can pay most of it off right out of the gate within like a month period of time, I can get a 13% discount. I could get anywhere from a 13 to 5%
Mhm.
discount on that. And they've already paid me as the provider group the dollars up front because the patient's enrolled into their payment plan portion. So within 14 days, I'm getting the payment once the patient said, yep, please pay my organization. So we're partnering with groups like that. So patients have can do our traditional payment plan or they could go to a business partner. Additionally, having financial assistance packages that don't necessarily, as a for profit, have to meet the FPL. But if you have something that helps a patient in that journey, even if it's a 50% reduction or a 45% reduction in addition to whatever your self-pay rate might be if they're a self-pay patient, or even if they're not a self-pay patient and they have coverage, having those abilities to really screen them and screen their family population to make that determinants. And you don't even have to do it like a nonprofit where it stands for a full year. You can do it where they have to reapply every 6 months. That's the beauty of being at a for-profit. You can tailor it to match what nonprofits are doing, but tailor it to what your financial means as an organization. So you're still meeting that intent of profitability for your organization. And then I think the other portion is it costs us nothing to help patients screen themselves for Medicaid. It
Mm.
really is where we could educate them, point them to the websites where they can go out and do the online, do I qualify 5 minute screening? And if they do, then they can enroll in it. And we point them to a Medicaid provider. My organization doesn't accept Medicaid right now unless it's a secondary coverage, but we are pointing them and helping refer them to an in-network provider for future care. So we'll give them the free care for that first visit, and then we're really pointing them to, hey, here's where you really should go. Let us help you get established there with that other organization who is set to take care of you, and it will help you financially long term, so you're not identifying
Oh,
as a
absolutely.
self-pay patient. I think the
That's
other
awesome.
portion that we're missing here is everybody should be screened for additional coverage. So, a lot of patients, and I see it a ton in our Seattle market. I'm a college student. I don't quite remember what my coverage is. I just come in for an appointment
Mhm.
and I'm asking my parents, but they're not texting me back and getting back to me. So, I end up marking as self pay. We can help our patients by doing coverage discovery for them and running
Right.
it through coverage discovery platform and saying, you know what, Josh, we found you. We found what your insurance is. It's under your parents. We've added it to your account. You're good to go. That helps ease the younger generation that doesn't always have that material right at hand for their own visits. So I think it's really about that full centric journey up front, giving them those options so that they know what we could be providing them. Additionally, post, anytime we're calling for collections with a patient, we should be sharing that information. And if you have the ability to update your statements with it on the back. Like, here's all of our options for you.
Oh, wow. That's a great idea. That's awesome. And then, because it sounds like you're listening, you're really looking out for the patient. I think that's amazing that when you really say throw the kitchen sink at them, you're throwing, the bathtub as well and the swimming pool, everything's going. So it's really going to help them, so it sounds like you're really listening to, what's going to really help them. So for organizations who are listening today, whether it's on demand or live with us here, especially for nonprofits, or especially for profits, groups that may not have the same flexibilities as nonprofits, what's the most realistic first step that they can take to make financial journey feel more manageable, if you will, and less adversarial for patients?
I think the biggest thing first is if you don't offer a payment plan, any type of payment plan you could offer is the easiest to do, even if it's only a 3 month, right? Or a four
Mhm.
month. I think the other thing is when you look at it from a surgical perspective or a major procedure perspective, yes, we always want to get a deposit or as much as that down. History has shown point of service or pre-collection of service shows the best, but also giving your patient an option up front, letting them know like, hey, we understand you might not be able to pay the full amount up front, but we can set that up in auto payments over a course of 3 months. Or, you know what, we're going to schedule your surgery 2 months out so that we at least have 2/3 of what it's going to be prior to your surgery up front. So there's ways that we could adjust our ability to help the patient up front, know what their cost is going to be. In addition, putting them in a prepayment plan or a post-payment plan model. It's perfectly acceptable and capable of doing that.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, Evan, that's all the questions I have. And I could probably go on and on and on, but I really want to get to the audience. So, looking into the audience questions, I do have one here. How do you operationalize these financial conversations at the point of service without making patients feel pressured or making staff uncomfortable? That's an age-old question. That's been
That
around
is
for
an age-old question. We really we're leveraging the QR code actually. So our staff will say, hey, we need to you have a copay due of $10 today. Also, we see that you have an outstanding balance of $100. Would you like to take care of that today? And if a patient says, oh, I can't, then we say, that's okay. Let's go ahead and have you scan this QR code. It'll point you to what financial services options we have and what payment plan options you have as well. And you can always reach out to our business office colleagues for assistance as well. So that's the extent of our conversation with our patient in the clinic setting, is really just helping point them to the tool and resource and the team who can long-term support them. And then when the patient does call in or we send out that first statement, we follow it up with a message as well, linking them over to our financial assistance page, letting them see what options we have available. So we really are just trying to put the material in the patient's hand and let them guide their journey and ask us the questions versus us saying, hey, let's sign you up for this, or we recommend you do this. We've had some success too. We had a patient with a large balance, and with our partnership with, I don't know, is it okay to say their name on here?
Sure, go ahead.
Sure.
Yeah.
Able Pay. That patient actually was able to set up a payment plan a little bit longer than what we could offer at a reduced rate, and they did get that savings as well. So it was super helpful for them. And the patient came back and said, thanks. I would have never known to sign up for this free service basically to consolidate. And they were able to consolidate other bills with other health systems with Able Pay. So it wasn't just paying ZoomCare, but they're able to pay off with other health systems as well in one lump payment, versus it's kind of like a consolidated payment plan across entities versus it being solely for with us at one to one.
That is awesome. That is awesome. So, and it's also, another question that we have from the audience here is, what metrics should leaders watch to know whether changes in estimation, verification, patient payment options are actually improving both the patient experience and financial performance? Yeah, that's a good
Yeah.
question.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the first one that I always look at is where's my self-pay AR sitting? And then how many patients have actually applied for one of our plans or signed up for one of our plans? That metric alone tells you, are they leveraging your services or not? And then from there, the verification portion is really around, looking at coverage discovery, how many times have we pre-verified, and then verifying estimates too. If you provide an actual estimate, running your estimate and holding true to that for your patient is what's key. I understand it's just an estimate. We apply it just like we would in ABN, saying, hey, 20% or $100, whichever is the higher of, is how we're going to append it and make sure that we're keeping within the same range as what we would for a Medicare patient with an ABN out-of-pocket portion. So we really try to measure those and see, are we meeting that same portion? And if we gave a patient an estimate And we provided that exact same service, but they had a higher acuity. We also go back and let the patient know, like, hey, you might experience your visit took longer than what we probably estimated today it being. So I just want you to know you're probably going to see a higher price come through. And if that's a trouble, please just call our business office and they'll see what they can do to assist you. So,
Right. Perfect. Perfect. Awesome. Well, and I don't see any other questions. But yeah, so that's it for today. Evan, always thank you. You're actually a regular on office hours, and it's always amazing information that you bring because it's such practical, experiential information as well. It's more than just knowledge. So really appreciate you being on today.
thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure, and this is a subject near and dear to my heart. I've been luckily enough, my leadership at ZoomCare has been very supportive of us bringing this to our patient population.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. And I want to thank everyone else for joining us live on office hours. And this also will be available on demand on our website at infinix.com, where you can also find articles, case studies, and solutions about everything RCM.
Thanks for joining us. Subscribe to get notified when our next episode is online. For more information for how we can help you increase reimbursements at your company, check out our website at infinix.com. That's INFINX.com.